Hi, my name is Matt Kaiser. Welcome to our event celebrating the work of the DC Compassionate Release Clearinghouse. Early in the COVID pandemic, the DC City Council created a mechanism for people who are in prison serving DC code offenses, criminal violations of DC law, to come home because of the pandemic and for other reasons that I can talk about in a minute. That mechanism is called compassionate release. And once that law was passed, an ability to come home was opened up for thousands of DC code offenders throughout the Bureau of Prisons. That tremendous opportunity required a tremendous effort to get word to those people, to get them lawyers, to get them able to take advantage of this program. And so from that need, the DC Compassionate Release Clearinghouse was born. A questionnaire was sent to every DC code offender in the Bureau of Prisons, asking them about their health, whether they qualified for compassionate release under this new law that the DC Council had passed. If they had, what the likelihood of them being uniquely susceptible to COVID was because of their health. If they had been in prison or were old enough to take advantage of certain other provisions of the law, and other information about the underlying nature of their case, their family members, their contacts in the community, whether they had a reentry plan. Those questionnaires went out to people in prison, and about 700 came back. And the DC Compassionate Release Clearinghouse, the folks you are going to hear from tonight, have done tremendous work taking those claims, processing those claims, and finding lawyers for those folks. We have received more than 700 responses. We have placed more than 150 of those with lawyers, but the need is great to find more lawyers to take these incredibly important and incredibly cool cases where you can make a direct, meaningful impact in somebody's life through a relatively discrete project, a relatively discrete pro bono project, which has just a huge impact. Our firm has taken them. They are incredibly fulfilling cases. And one of the purposes of tonight is to let you know about these cases so that if it's something you would like to do at your firm, you can take advantage of that. The DC Clearinghouse, the work of the DC Clearinghouse got done because of the tremendous efforts of the organizations that came together to do the work. Akin Gump has volunteered just countless hours taking the questionnaires that came in, screening them, making sure that the people who get counsel are the ones who should get counsel and should get counsel first. The National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers has set up the DC Clearinghouse webpage, and they will put the link on the webpage or on the screen right now for you to look at. Click on that link, do the training, sign up to take a case if you see this and are moved to take one of these very cool cases. The Washington Lawyers Committee has brought everybody together and provided tremendous resources getting the information out to people, responding to questions, and providing real leadership on this project. The Public Defender Service for the District of Columbia has done a lot of work using their resources and their institutional knowledge and their relationships with so many people who are incarcerated through the District of Columbia to add to this effort. FAM, formerly known as Families Against Mandatory Minimums, has been a valuable coalition partner, clearinghouse partner that has provided incredible, invaluable technical resource and access to a bunch of doctors and medical professionals so that if a pro bono lawyer takes this case, they can get a pro bono doctor to do an expert report about whether the person is uniquely susceptible to COVID. James Ziegler, who is who's with Second Look DC, but is also a representative to the Criminal Justice Act panel in the District of Columbia, has also been an incredibly part of this, telling us about what the Criminal Justice Act panel is seeing. DLA Piper has taken on a project to do a secondary screen of cases that we haven't been able to assign to make sure that we can file a motion for the appointment of counsel to see if we can get Criminal Justice Act lawyers to take those cases. And of course, as you will see in the rolling ticker at the bottom of the screen, many law firms in the District of Columbia have taken these cases and have brought real, important, immediate change to the people who so desperately need to get out of prison because they're uniquely vulnerable to this horrible pandemic. We hope you enjoy our event tonight. We hope you enjoy learning about these cases, and we hope you are moved to take one of these cases. They are discrete in time. They make a tremendous, tremendous impact in the lives of the clients. And we have found them at our firm uniquely satisfying cases to do. My firm, Kaiser Dillon, has done more than a few of these, and you'll hear from one of our lawyers a little bit later in the event. But for now, for all of the partners who have come together and have let me take a role in working on this project, thank you so much for your work. To everybody who's taking a little bit of time out of your lives to watch this video and to thoughtfully consider taking one of these cases, thank you very much. Please enjoy our evening.
Hi everyone, I'm Juliana Andoni and I'm counsel at FAM. FAM works nationwide and at the state and DC level to advocate for sentencing reform, prison condition reform, and increased second chance mechanisms, including compassionate release. We've been working on compassionate release for years now, and we were delighted to see DC Council take action in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. We also have been thrilled to partner and be part of the DC Compassionate Release Clearinghouse and to work with the court, public defenders, panel attorneys, and pro bono counsel like yourselves to make the idea of compassionate release not just a theory, but a reality for some of the most medically vulnerable people in the federal prison system. We are still getting many, many calls and requests for assistance in DC, and we know that tonight we want to celebrate the work of so many of you and also to urge more people to get involved. So please help us spread the word to friends and colleagues and lawyers you see on the street. We really need more help to help bring people home in 2021. Thanks again.
Hi, I'm James Ziegler, the founder and director of the Second Look Project, a legal nonprofit here in DC, representing people seeking sentence reductions, including through compassionate release. I want to express our appreciation for all the pro bono lawyers who over the last year have expended their time and considerable talents helping to bring people home and reunite families in the face of this unprecedented crisis. Last March, many of us watched with a sense of helplessness as the pandemic began to spread through the federal prison system where many of our clients were held. That began to change to a sense of hope and resolve with the passage of this law and the considerable show of force from the DC legal community as it began to litigate these cases. Access to pro bono counsel has made an extraordinary difference for many incarcerated clients, giving them a sense that someone is really fighting for them and that they have the best lawyer they can get. As practitioners, we at the Second Look Project have seen firsthand the role pro bono lawyers have made in developing a set of best practices in these cases and bringing about helpful judicial opinions that many of us have relied on in our own cases. However, the need for pro bono attorneys remains great, with hundreds more people with claims of compassionate release that have not yet been heard. So if you're able to take one of these cases, please do. It can literally save a life and bring a measure of comfort to a DC family with an incarcerated loved one, knowing that someone is on their side. Your work will mean a lot, and you won't regret it.
As we all know, the global COVID-19 pandemic caused tremendous difficulty across the country and the world in a wide variety of areas, and the federal prison system is a prime example of this. The COVID-19 management systems in federal prisons are poor at best, and at times earlier on in the pandemic and even still now, the positivity and death rates among inmates are alarmingly high. During a global pandemic, the release of inmates from a prison system that cannot seem to manage basic protection and safety measures seemed to me like an excellent use of that doctrine, and taking a case was one way that we as attorneys could help those impacted by the poor management systems.
I saw it as an avenue to truly give back during the pandemic. It's not just pro bono during the pandemic, it's pro bono that relates directly to the pandemic, because you are helping out inmates who it's determined or will be determined that they no longer pose a risk to the community, but because of COVID, the prison system presents a risk to their health. It's effectively a death sentence for some of the prisoners who are in vulnerable categories. In addition, by having fewer inmates in prisons, it will help the other inmates survive and stay healthy, as well as the staff members.
Hi, I'm John Albanus, Resource Counsel for the DC Compassionate Release Project. On this day of celebration, we must remember the importance of our work to saving lives. The pandemic has impacted all of our lives in some way, but it is particularly difficult for people in prison, where social distancing is impossible, conditions are unsanitary, and medical treatment is subpar. For many, contracting COVID-19 in prison is a death sentence. In working with all the volunteers and our partners, I have seen a tremendous level of dedication from lawyers across the legal community, from law school clinics to large firms and solo practitioners. Your dedication is so striking, especially in these difficult times. You all share a common concern for your clients and their families, as if they were your own. Your selflessness is unimpeachable. You are truly unsung heroes. You do not do this work for accolades or ambition, but because you know deep down inside that it is the right thing to do. Your moral compass guides you, as it guides us. And how can we not be moved by our clients' stories? These are the stories of people growing up in marginalized communities, of people tried for crimes on shoddy evidence, of people of color who bear a disproportionate impact of our laws, of elderly, sick, and harmless people serving sentences that go well beyond notions of fairness and justice, especially in the midst of a global pandemic. Your joint efforts are why we have seen so many motions granted already and expect to see many more in the days and weeks ahead. In closing, please consider taking a case, and to those of you who have already done so or will take another one, thank you so much.
I'm Stephen Logan, the project manager for NACDL's Return to Freedom project. The National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers is proud to be a partner in this effort and thanks you for the work that you're doing. After the DC Council enacted emergency legislation creating a pathway for compassionate release for incarcerated individuals serving DC sentences, a call went out for pro bono attorneys, and the DC Bar responded with enthusiasm. So far, over 200 attorneys have volunteered to review cases and file motions. These volunteers represent more than 100 different organizations, solo practitioners, small firms, large firms, professors, clinics. Everyone has stepped up. Along with the attorneys, there are more paralegals, law students, interns, and other support staff who have given their time. This pandemic has made the last year stressful and scary for us all. I cannot imagine what it's like to be in a prison cell or have a loved one in prison during this time, the fear and the anxiety that must be. But I do know that your advocacy can be a light into that darkness. You may be the first person fighting for them that they feel is on their side. And just knowing that you're there can bring hope. I stand with the partners you have heard from and those you will hear, and thanking you for the work and being in awe of the advocacy that you've done so far. To echo James Ziegler, you are literally saving lives. You follow in the footsteps of those who have championed civil rights before you and by fighting for those who need your help. If you have not already volunteered to take a case, please go and sign up right now at crclearinghouse.org/DC. You don't have to be a criminal practitioner. In fact, most of our volunteers aren't. There are attorneys from the broad spectrum of the legal profession. There are many wonderful firms who are partners in this work, and I can't name them all right now. But I do want to highlight three. Akin Gump and Wiley Wren have been involved since the very beginning, and they took on the tough task of managing the applicants coming in. They've taken the applications from the prisoners themselves and their families, pulled all of that together, looked for other records, followed up, and put together all the information to help you get started. If you received an intake sheet or other documents when you took the case, they're the ones to thank. DLA Piper has helped in reviewing large batches of cases and done research to help with the filing of motions for appointment of counsel. Along with this work, these tasks that they've taken on, they're also working on cases of their own. Now it is my pleasure to introduce someone from one of those firms, Margot Rasconi from the Akin Gump firm. She's going to talk about the work on the case that she took on and the work that Akin is doing. So now, thank you, Margot.
Hi, my name is Margot Rasconi, and I'm an associate at Akin Gump here in DC. When COVID hit, there was a lot of uncertainty for pretty much everyone. What is this? What's going to happen? How long is this going to last? Then it started spreading like wildfire in prisons. And I remember speaking with my colleague Abby and thinking, what about our DC parole clients? They were spread in prisons across the country, often hundreds of miles away from any friends or family, and many of them had been incarcerated decades ago, so they were now old men. Suddenly, they faced not only years and decades longer in prison, but also the possibility of severe illness or even death because of COVID. And because they were convicted under DC law, they couldn't use federal compassionate release, nor could they use any sort of state clemency process because they're DC citizens. In other words, until DC passed its compassionate release law, they were stuck. Thankfully, I think less than 24 hours after DC passed that law, this coalition was formed. And suddenly we had attorneys across the DMV filing motions on behalf of DC's incarcerated citizens seeking compassionate release, and many were granted. I've had the honor of being able to help a handful of Akin associates across the country file motions for compassionate release for DC inmates. And I've even been able to file one just, working personally on it myself. My client is, I think, over almost 75 years old at this point. He's been incarcerated for over 50 years. And in the 2+ decades he's been in BOP custody, he's received maybe a handful of minor infractions. And otherwise, he should be the perfect candidate for compassionate release. But his motion was denied. I remember being terrified to call him and terrified to call his daughter to let them know the news. I didn't know if they would be mad or upset with me or, justly mad and upset about the denial. But when I called, as disappointed as my client and his daughter were, more than anything, they were just incredibly grateful. He was so thankful that we had to put all this time and effort and energy into advocating on his behalf. And as someone who considers himself to be somewhat of a jailhouse lawyer himself, he was grateful that we were willing to talk through our thoughts and why we were making certain decisions and briefing it a certain way, and just that we were able to include him in this process. And his daughter felt similarly. So, of course, our goal is first and foremost to get these guys out, to get them their freedom, to get them to safety. But not everyone's going to be released. Not every motion is going to be granted. The arguments I made and that Akin associates have made, however, have given a voice to people who are often voiceless or at the very best, rarely ever heard. And if you could volunteer, if you chose to volunteer, then you could do the same. Compassionate release, granted or denied, that itself is still worth a lot. And it would be great if you also could volunteer. Thank you.
In terms of the support that the project has provided, we had training, we have people who are there to answer any questions, we have lots of data on which to rely.
The DC Compassionate Release Project has been exceptionally supportive. The website has a bevy of resources from successful and unsuccessful compassionate release motions that were filed and orders that were released, which gave us a heads up as to what worked, what didn't work, and what the particular judges may have been thinking, or what the arguments the government might have made, because they did happen to use some of the same arguments.
We certainly could not have secured his release without the resources and support of the project. Prior to this experience, I had no experience taking on compassionate release cases, but the resources and training that the project provided helped guide us through the process and helped us feel supported throughout the whole experience.
In addition to the resources in terms of the motion itself, the folks in charge were exceptionally helpful in that they were more than willing to answer emails whenever I had questions. Mr. Pierce Swin was very, very influential in helping me get through the process as well, being more than willing to answer my text messages and help me through the process as we got the W. If anybody's considering taking a case, highly recommend it. Easily the most rewarding experience of my legal career thus far. And there are plenty of resources so that even if you haven't done it before, like I had in going into my first case, it doesn't matter because you'll have the support needed to help some people out.
I feel like this is something that anyone with a legal background can step in and handle. I recommend that you all give it a shot. You can work on a team, like I'm currently working on a team with another lawyer, as well as the court-appointed attorney is now helping us out, or you can work on it yourself. The skills translate, and with the support of the project, I think you can do it, and I highly recommend it. It's been great for me.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Smith, and I am the Executive Director of the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs. Thank you for joining us this evening to celebrate the incredible success of the District of Columbia Compassionate Release Clearinghouse. COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on prisoners. Those who are incarcerated are 5 times more likely to catch COVID and to die as a person in the free world. Social distancing is impossible in prison. Access to personal protective equipment is limited, and basic sanitation supplies are often scarce. Compounding inadequate infection control practices, a high percentage of prisoners have pre-existing conditions that increase the risk of serious illness or death if they catch COVID. Getting prisoners from prison to home is not only an imperative to their individual health, but to the public health as well. When DC changed its law to allow prisoners the opportunity to apply directly to the Superior Court, a coalition of local advocates came together to create the DC Clearinghouse. Tremendous thanks go to the Public Defender Service, the GW Legal Clinic, the Second Look Program, the Council for Court Excellence, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, FAM, and others. In response to the call from the Clearinghouse, the DC legal community stepped up. Hundreds of lawyers from scores of law firms agreed to take a case. Over the past year, firms have taken more than 150 compassionate release cases under the DC program. Special thanks go to the firms of Aiken Gump, Wiley Ryan Fielding, and DLA Piper. Each of these firms took on the massive task of reviewing and screening the requests for assistance and reaching out to prisoners and their loved ones for sufficient information to place the case. I also want to thank Matt Kaiser from Kaiser Dillon for stepping in and taking a leadership role in the operation of the Clearinghouse. The good news is that the generosity and commitment of the legal community has secured counsel for more than 150 prisoners. The bad news is that more than 900 prisoners have sought assistance. We need more help. Through the presentations this evening, you have heard first-person accounts of the difference that your assistance can make. If you have not already taken a case, please go to crclearinghouse.org today and sign up. If you've already taken a case and you can take another, please do that. Your work has the opportunity to change lives. I also have the great pleasure to introduce Judge Gerald Fisher. Judge Fisher has served on the Superior Court bench since 2001. He is a scholar and a teacher regarding capital punishment, criminal defense, and other equal justice issues. We are particularly happy to have him with us tonight because he has coordinated the court's response to the flood of compassionate release cases. Working with Judge Fisher has been a reminder of how lucky we are in the District of Columbia. In the face of the COVID pandemic, remote work, a closed courthouse, and other challenges, Judge Fisher and the other judges on the bench demonstrated a strong commitment to equal justice. We are very grateful for that commitment and the hard work of the bench to hear and adjudicate these cases. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jerry Fisher. I'm an associate judge on the Superior Court of the District of Columbia, currently assigned as the presiding judge in our mental health community court. But in addition to that, from April of last year until January of this year, I was also overseeing our process for handling compassionate release motions. That legislation that provided for that was passed by the District of Columbia City Council on an emergency basis back in March of last year. It became effective in April of last year, and it had been extended several times and recently has become permanent legislation that after the congressional review period, if nothing happens, it will become permanent legislation effective of March of 2021. Thus far, there have been 560 some motions that have been filed. 540 some of those have been assigned to judges. The remaining will be assigned. And of those 540, a little over 300 have been decided. And approximately 1/3 of those, 100 to be exact, have resulted in the release, that is the granting of relief to the defendants in those cases. Because of my involvement with this process, I have had a lot of interaction with the groups that have been primarily dealing with compassionate release: the District of Columbia Public Defender Service, the United States Attorney's Office, the Superior Court Trial Lawyers Association, and the CJA Bar here in the Superior Court, various law clinics, and last but certainly not least has been the Lawyers Committee and its clearinghouse. And in particular, I've been had a lot of interaction with Jonathan Smith and Matthew Kaiser, who've been in charge of that project. The Lawyers Committee and the clearinghouse overtook a pretty daunting assignment. They decided to inform all of the prisoners, DC prisoners who were serving their sentences in federal institutions, of their possible avenue of relief by compassionate release motions and also by other legislation. And they committed themselves, for those prisoners who responded to them and appeared to have potentially meritorious claims, to try to connect them with lawyers who would take these cases on a pro bono basis. And so they've been recruiting lawyers and law firms, to a certain extent clinics and other organizations. As of today, more than 30 motions have been filed by lawyers, law firms, and organizations that have been recruited by the Lawyers Committee. But Jonathan and Matt tell me that there are several hundred additional prisoners who have contacted them who may have meritorious claims, and they're trying very hard to recruit compassionate release attorneys who will work on a pro bono basis for them. Obviously, these are not easy cases to handle. One of the problems with the DC sentencing system is our prisoners are in federal institutions. They may be hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from the District of Columbia. These cases are fairly old, most of them, some 20, 30, some even 40 years old. The prisoners have medical records and other institutional records that may be in one place, but they also may be strewn among various institutions where they have served their sentences. So it's not necessarily very easy to handle these cases. On the other hand, they're very rewarding. As I said a moment ago, more than 100 of the prisoners have been granted relief by judges on our court. The legislation was designed to provide relief primarily for individuals who had served significant portions of very lengthy sentences, but had proven that they were no longer a danger to the community, they had been rehabilitated, and that they deserved to come back into society from prison. And in those cases where that relief has been granted, I think that's a very rewarding experience for lawyers to be involved in. And so these are difficult, but I think very compelling cases in a lot of instances. So I would encourage those of you who have an interest in the issues that surround this topic, prison reform, sentencing reform, or maybe just the notion that some people who have committed very serious crimes a significant period of time ago can show that they have been reformed and can return to the community and become a contributing member of society again. And I would strongly encourage you to volunteer for these cases. I certainly want to thank the Lawyers Committee for being involved in this process. I want to thank those lawyers who have been recruited and have been working on the motions thus far for the work that they do. I know from the court's perspective, this is a service to the defendants. It's a service to the court. It's a service to the community. And I think in the best examples of pro bono work that can be done by lawyers and a real public service by them. So I'd like to encourage you to join the Lawyers Committee and volunteer to do some of these cases. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Misty Thomas, Executive Director of the Council for Court Excellence, or CCE, a nonprofit here in DC focused on ensuring that our justice system serves all members of our community equitably. And on behalf of CCE, I wanted to join the chorus of thank yous to all of you that have and all of you that will take a compassionate release case here in DC. CCE works to improve the policies for district residents surrounding due process, incarceration, and reentry. And so because of those linked priorities, we were really proud to help DC pass the compassionate release emergency statute last year. But we knew that passing the legislation was only the very first step. And what was really critical were finding the dedicated, energetic, and quick-moving advocates to step in and support those men and women who were so anxious to be able to demonstrate the grounds for their release. And amid an awful pandemic that we know disproportionately impacted our incarcerated friends and neighbors, your efforts have been so important. Thank you so much. And thank you in advance to those of you who are still going to take a second case of the many that remain. So thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Avis Buchanan. I'm the Director of the Public Defender Service for the District of Columbia. Welcome to this important presentation on compassionate release litigation. First, I would like to thank our clearinghouse partners, the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs, Families Against Mandatory Minimums, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, the George Washington Law School Prisoner and Reentry Clinic, Aiken Gump, Strauss, Hauer, and Feld, Wiley Ryan, and DLA Piper. We're very grateful for the work you're doing in this area. PDS has had an important role in these compassionate release matters. We helped enact the legislation working with Professor Jessica Steinberg. We helped establish the clearinghouse. We've served as a liaison to the law school clinics working on these matters. We've provided training and model pleadings. We have done reentry work on behalf of those who have been released, and we've represented clients in these compassionate release petitions ourselves. It's important to provide this representation. This is a racial justice issue, as our clients are mostly brown and Black, and it's a freedom and a health issue as people are facing the coronavirus and all of its negative health implications and its risk to life. Please seriously consider taking on these cases. PDS has represented over 100 of these clients, but there are many, many more who need your help. We'd like you to get in touch with the clearinghouse and help us find attorneys to represent everybody on the list. Thank you for your attention.
So after the judge in the DC Superior Court granted our motion, we had the opportunity to call our client and let him know that he was going to be released. And having that opportunity to be in communication with him throughout the process, and also the opportunity to call him and let him know that he was going to be released from incarceration after 33 years was one of the most memorable experiences I've had as an attorney to date.
He put a lot of faith and trust in me, and I'll never forget when I first introduced myself to him and was right up front honest and said, I'm an intellectual property attorney. And to his credit, he rolled with it. From that point on, I put in, everything I had knowing that he had put trust and faith in me. And I got to tell him that he was going home. And this was a couple weeks before Christmas. So, I mean, you can't buy that, right? That was one of the most special moments.
I first shared the news of his release with his mom, who laughed, cried, sang, cheered, and yelled all at the same time. I cried too. We were so happy and so relieved because unfortunately COVID-19 had been spreading rapidly at the facility where my client was detained, and we were so worried that he would get sick before the judge ruled on his motion.
I've been fighting for 29 years, by myself, trying to, get home to my family and to receive the legal representation, from this program meant the world to me. For me to learn of all the hard work that my lawyer put in to fight, on this compassionate release, and for the judge to grant it, it brought tears to my eyes because I finally been released after 29 years and 3 months. And for my family to see me out there in the free world, it's a gift that keeps on giving.
I was at risk sitting in that prison. It was infested with coronavirus, and it was just a big relief after doing 19 years in prison. And it was just a relief, man, and I thank God. I thank God, and I thank John for helping and for being there, for answering all my questions and accepting all of my calls. And I just thank him for that.
And I was so surprised when he knocked on the window, and I looked through the window and there he was. We had a Merry Christmas, and definitely for a long time I hadn't been able to share the New Year's with him.
I called his sister Julia, and we both cried on the phone. She was just so happy after all this time. And then I called his daughter, and she just screamed on the phone. She was at work and she was so excited. And then the next day is when we actually got to talk to our client about it. And he already knew, his case counselor had told him, but I think he wanted to hear it from us to really believe it.
It means a lot to me because one of the greatest things that an inmate look forward to, and that is being free, being able to be back in the community, to participate in community activities. Again, I was shocked, and I say, wow, this can't be happening. This can't be happening to me. And I was somewhat like, I still couldn't believe it. I still couldn't believe it. And not until she said, well, you're going to be released on such and such a date.
Hello, I'm Norman Reamer, Executive Director of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, or NACDL as we refer to ourselves. And I am so proud and so pleased to be a partner in this DC Compassionate Release project. I'm so proud of all of the lawyers who have pitched in to help, all of our partners, and so grateful that we've had a chance to bring freedom back to people who not only are languishing in jail for far too long and deserve to be released, but actually are in danger if they are not released. There are so many more Keith Rogers and Abu Shakurs and Marcus Pages still waiting for assistance in order to get a compassionate release application submitted. And I know that out there are many more lawyers who would love to be in a position of Rachel or Jessamine or Jade or Anna, of being able to be that one catalyst that helps to bring somebody back to freedom. So I hope that you will consider signing up for this program. And in order to underscore just how important we view this, we're pleased to have a very special message to deliver to you from one of the truly great individuals in our profession, and that's Barry Scheck. Of course, Barry has put the concept of the innocence movement in the front of everyone's thinking about the criminal legal system. He and the Innocence Project co-founder Peter Neufeld have really revolutionized the way we think about our justice system. But he's here to deliver another message, which is it's not just about wrongful conviction, it's about wrongful sentences. And we have a chance in this project to do something about that. It is my great pleasure to introduce the co-founder of the Innocence Project, a professor of law at Cardozo Law School in New York, and a past president of NACDL and a member of our board of trustees of our foundation, Barry Scheck.
I want to begin by thanking all the groups and individuals who have come together to support the DC Compassionate Release Project and to make an urgent plea to reach out to friends and colleagues to join you in this important work. You are helping give the gift of freedom. Under any circumstances, there's no greater good deed that we as lawyers can do. But during the era of this pandemic, this is literally a matter of life and death for those who are elderly or ill. Beyond that, your willingness to step up is important for two critical reasons. As co-founder of the Innocence Project, many of you know me as someone who for decades seeks to overturn wrongful convictions. There's now widespread agreement that wrongful convictions are a symptom of a fundamentally broken legal system, but not enough attention is paid. Not enough understanding is out there that there is a problem that arises from a structured scheme of injustice, wrongful sentencing. Too many people are sentenced to imprisonment for far longer than is necessary or humane. Individuals who have turned their lives around and done everything possible to show they will be productive members of civil society languish in prisons for no good reason. The consequence is tragic for them, for their families, and for their communities. Projects like DC Compassionate Release will not fully address the problem, but they can help. We need to take full advantage of this opportunity to make sure that every person who has a chance to reclaim their freedom submits the best possible application. Second, never forget the loneliness and isolation of imprisonment. One cannot overstate how much it means to an individual's dignity and self-worth to have someone in their corner willing to give them a renewed chance at freedom, willing to fight for them, especially at a time when disease is ravaging the nation's prisons. Your willingness to stand with them and fight for them can make all the difference in the world to someone who feels abandoned by society. So, if you have already volunteered to help, thank you. If you can take another case or more, please do. And if you've not already done so, please volunteer now. And please reach out to the colleagues, fellow members of your friends, and if you have clients with legal departments, try to get them to enlist as well. The project will provide you with all the training and support you need. This is a great, great opportunity to put your ability to advocate, to work on behalf of those most in need at a most critical time in our nation's history, a once-in-a-century pandemic. There are many, many more applicants waiting for help, and time is critical. Please sign up now. Go to https://crclearinghouse.org/DC. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Keith Rogers, and I've just been released on Compassionate Release, November 5th, 2020. And I just want to let you know, what it meant to me, to get the legal representation, from the program. It meant so much to me that I've been fighting for 29 years, by myself, trying to, get home to my family and to receive the legal representation, from this program meant the world to me. And for me to learn of all the hard work that my lawyer put in to fight, on this compassionate release, and for the judge to grant it, it brought tears to my eyes because I finally been released after 29 years and 3 months. And for my family to see me out there in the free world, it's a gift that keeps on giving. Because now that I'm home, that's all they've been looking for is for me to come home. And now that through this project has made that possible, It had my mother crying, it had my family members crying, my children crying, as well as my grandchildren crying, as well as myself. Because when they finally released me and I walked out those front doors, you know, that's all it was tears of joy. For me to be home and for them to see me home, finally, after 29 years.
Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. That is our presentation. That's what we've got. Again, if what you've seen tonight has shown you that you would like to take one of these incredibly important cases, if you would like to spend a relatively small amount of time making a real and important impact, a real change in someone's life to get them home, to find someone who has long since paid for their crime, get them back to their family, get them back to their community, get them out of harm's way from this deadly pandemic, please go to the link that will appear on the screen again for the Compassionate Release Clearinghouse. Do the very short training, sign up, register. We will get you a case, and you can take one of these and make a meaningful change in somebody's life. Thank you again for tuning in. Take care.